Hey, welcome to another episode of Relatively Damaged Live. My name is Angela, and this is
Kat. Kat.
The live shows are currently streamed on Mondays to Twitch, YouTube, and Facebook. Remember to follow or subscribe and share with your friends. On the Monday segment of the show, Kat and I discuss topics we find interesting for about 30 minutes. So let's get to today's topic. What the heck is cognitive dissonance?
Well, we're going to start with a quote from one of our favorite people, Brene Brown. And the quote is as follows: competing emotions and contradictory thoughts are messy and can feel uncomfortable, vulnerable, even irritating. But it's important to remember that this push-pull is a reflection of our complexity. And if we're willing to stay with it and stay curious, complexity is one of our greatest teachers. There's nothing more limiting than tapping out of tension and oversimplifying the thoughts and feelings that have the power to help us understand who we are and what we need.
I love that last part of the quote.
Oh,
Thoughts
yeah.
and feelings that have the power to help us understand who we are and what we need. Isn't it interesting that so many times it's that uncomfortable, like looking forward to a holiday get together, but not looking forward to it at the same time because there might be conflict.
Exactly. And I mean that's the interesting thing is kind of leaning into the experience of whatever it is. I love that staying curious. You can't see it, but it's there right behind your wall. Stay
Right
curious.
there. It does. It helps me keep my sanity.
Well, it can, you know, and this kind of reminds me of another thing that it's kind of a related topic that we had on this, but of the staying curious. And I've kind of been playing with it in my mind. It was about the 6 answers to questions. And here we're oversimplifying things. So our shows how we oversimplify. It's yes, no, I don't know, I don't care, I don't want to talk about it, and I don't want you to talk about it. Those last two are my favorite. And it's a lot of times it's a combination of those things where those conflicting emotions get in there, especially if it's an uncomfortable topic or conversation. You know, I don't want to talk about it, and I certainly don't want you to talk about it. So we let it go. And I've been pondering this, it's like if I'm staying curious, I can get out of those 6 questions.
Explain.
Or 6 answers. Because as this quote said, life is complex. There are these competing emotions. Usually those quick answers to questions, especially of a complex nature, are because of that fear, that uncomfortableness, that irritation, that we're feeling. And it's just like, I want to feel better.
Are you talking about like that feeling, knowing what you need to do from your heart and at the same time not wanting to do it because it seems like the harder way?
Yeah, because or you really have to think about what is it that I want from this situation? What is the outcome that I want? What is the place I want to come from?
Mm-hmm.
Do I want to come from a place of defensiveness and divisiveness? Or do I want to be loving and kind? And so sometimes that loving, kind path, it seems all nice and, roses and happiness, but sometimes that's really the harder path.
Yeah.
And so that's where that dissonance comes in from
Mm-hmm.
who your instinctual reaction to something and the concept of who you want to be in any particular situation.
Well, and I think that's why in Adam Grant's book, he talks about defining yourself by your values. And there's something that happens when we do that. And I actually have a quote from him that I wanted to include today. You know, and it does talk about it from a different perspective. So I'm just going to go ahead and read it from Adam Grant, and this is from his book, Think Again. As consumers of information, we have a role to play in embracing a more nuanced point of view. When we're reading, listening, or watching, we can learn to recognize complexity as a signal of credibility, something you were just pointing to. We can favor content and sources that present many sides of an issue rather than just one or two. When we come across simplifying headlines, we can fight our tendency to accept binaries or black and whites, right? By asking what additional perspectives are missing between the extremes. This applies when we're the ones producing and communicating information too. New research suggests that when journalists acknowledge the uncertainties around facts on complex issues like climate change and immigration, it doesn't undermine the reader's trust. And multiple experiments have shown that when experts express doubt, they become more persuasive. When someone knowledgeable admits uncertainty, it surprises people, and they end up paying more attention to the substance of the argument. And I think that's true in relationships too.
Oh, yeah.
I don't have the answer always. And sometimes even when I think I do, it's not it. Sometimes just by staying open to possibilities, something else arises out of the conversation that is even better than what I thought the answer was going to be in the first place.
I agree with you 100% on that. You know, I find when I have conversations in relationships, I mean, I had a very interesting one where with Michelle, and we both had dug into our opinion. You know, she was like, I'm going to do this. And I'm like, no, you're not. You know, we have to discuss this. And it came down to, you know, for a few minutes, there was all this tension there. And I had to swing back and say, you know, we had agreed that before we were going to make any decisions about this, that we were going to talk about it. And so we said, you know, we're going to set it aside for now, making any decisions. We're going to ponder it. We're going to figure out a way that we can both come together and make a joint decision rather than it just be one way or the other. You know, I unilaterally decide to make a decision or she does. And I'm like, no, you know. And I say all that is because it is that whole thing about, you know, coming together. And, you know, I could have been like, fine, whatever, just do what you want to do. But I would have been unhappy with that decision. Hey, Paul, thank you.
We made this decision together to wear our hat. Well, actually, I think I came on, and then you're like, I'm going to go get mine.
Yeah, that's right. Everybody has to have an elf hat.
It could have gone the other way, but again, talking about making those decisions together and those difficult conversations, I think that's hard.
Yeah. Now, this was not a difficult decision. This was fun. But you know, when you're talking with, you know, someone you live in your household about, you know, money or, you know, things that you're going to do and you know, things like that can, you know, it can be very stressful when you have different ideas. Thanks, Laura. So, you know,
hold on 2 seconds. Kat is amazing, and I want to celebrate that Kat is amazing. So I keep forgetting I'm going on mute because the lawn guy's outside. So if you guys hear weird noises, that's what's happening.
Anyway, it's still better than the storms last week.
Yes.
So, either you can lean into that cognitive dissonance, go into the 6 answers to get out of it quickly, get out of that uncomfortable situation, or you can, again, like I said, just lean into it and kind
Yeah,
of
no,
accept that dissonance and play with it in your head. Stay curious. What is it that I'm feeling? What is it that I'm thinking? What is it that concerns me? Why do I feel that knot in the pit of my stomach when discussing this?
yeah. And just even you talking about that is reminding me of the meditation we did this morning with the Tonglen version, which is where, we bring in those uncomfortable feelings and we transform them and send back out love. And it's sometimes I think I have to work on doing that just for myself. Like I can't even do it for other people when I'm sitting in a moment of cognitive dissonance. It's like that uncomfortable feeling of having these two competing, seemingly opposite ideas at the same time. I love and hate someone, right? Like, like that's really hard. And it's really, really uncomfortable to sit, to find peace and understanding from those uncomfortable feelings. And how I do that. And here comes the lawn guy again. See, right now I'm having cognitive dissonance, guys. This is what my face looks like when I'm struggling because I'm frustrated that he's out there. And I am so grateful to be on with Kat having this conversation. And I want to share that knowledge of how sitting in it, while scary and uncomfortable, if I don't go into it, right? If I don't sink into the depths of despair, but can become friends with it, it's not so bad.
Exactly. I'm thinking of, look at all these complex, and I don't want to get into politics or anything like that, but think of all the complex issues that we face in our society. And people seem to be on one side or the other. There seems to be no curiosity, no interest in hearing what the other person has to say or the other side has to say. And so we can become entrenched in these issues. And really loud. Angela had to mute there for a second. So it becomes, we're really entrenched in those issues, and then it just permeates the whole of society. So depending on where we are, one or the other, and we almost look as on people who disagree with us as the enemy. And really, all these issues are extremely complex. And if you really start to understand them and stay curious, that's going to be the buzzword of the day. Stay curious about them, and investigate them, and really listen to all sides of what people are saying. It will give you this perspective that's not either or.
Yeah.
But it's like I can hear what you're saying, you know?
Yeah. You are reminding me of I was in a board meeting last week for the mental health board in the area I live in, and we are working on the alternative to 911. So, where mental health professionals will be sent out versus sending out law enforcement. And, it was funny talking about that curiosity at the, and I had been involved in given my input in the meetings leading up to this particular meeting where the recommendations were going to be, they were voted on and will be passed on to the Board of Supervisors. But someone in this meeting brought up a point that I was like, oh, I had not even thought about that. And the point was there was a sentence, or a point or a bullet point on the recommendations that said anyone who had any relationship with a law enforcement officer or had worked in law enforcement in the last 7 to 10 years could not participate on the committee. And someone brought that up and said, ugh, I'm not sure I agree with that. And I'm telling you, we're on Zoom, and I'm going to say the whole place was in an uproar, because I do believe there was an uproar. And people were, they were very disrespectful to the first gentleman, who could have probably, there were probably other words he could have used, but the reality is he didn't use those words, and they were really mean to him, and disrespectful. And I just listened. At one point I almost jumped in. I was like, no, I'm here to listen, and I want to I want to work more at being in this feeling of uncomfortableness. Because what if someday I'm in that position where I'm in a public meeting and people are yelling? How do I want to behave? And so, as I was listening, what started to happen as I sat in those feelings and I listened to that uncomfortableness, is I started to recognize that I was hearing fear, and that these people were scared to include law enforcement because of the experiences that they or someone close to them has had. And I thought, okay, maybe the best recommendation is right now for them to vote this in and accept that, there's just not going to be any law enforcement on this committee at this point in time, because maybe the most important starting place is safety. And if there's a place for them to voice their concerns and they can have safety, then maybe, because there's going to be crossover. I know there's going to be crossover, and I'm sad to know that there will be crossover. I think the hope is that there won't be, but at the end of the day, I think that humans are just unpredictable, and interesting things happen when people are scared or under the influence or struggling with a mental health emergency, or it's so complex. And at first I wanted to say, hey, this is so complex, we might want that information. And then I realized they can't even hear me right now. And that's not even helpful. Let's give them a voice. Because I'm part of that group actually that would prefer the wellness crisis calls. So let's have a voice. And for the people who aren't feeling as safe, let's give them that environment to feel safe in. And then let them learn because this is all new anyway. Who's to say that I even know what's best? I don't know. I think I might know, but there's no telling until we get there and until those experiences come. So what's the harm in agreeing with the people that are the most fearful at this point in time? But then I went the other way and thought, oh, we could also be setting ourselves up so that people are going to be like, it's going to be setting it up as law enforcement is horrible. And now we're getting the divide, and hate begets more hate. And are we setting ourselves up for that? So see, I was just all over the board on, thank goodness I wasn't on that board to have to make a decision, because I'm not certain I would have had enough time to sit with it just in that meeting to decide what is best for the community. Because ultimately what I would like to see is the unity and the peace and the love and the recognition that everyone is important, that equanimity, not the equality, but let's have some equanimity here. We're not all equal, and we never have been.
Well, I love what you said. What really stuck out to me in what you said, not stuck out, was where other people are coming from. Now, obviously, we don't know exactly what's going on in their heads, but we certainly can sense emotions in other people. And you hear the words and you're like, okay, it's coming from a place of fear. How often is that cognitive dissonance coming from a place of fear?
You mean someone having cognitive dissonance?
Yeah. How many people in that meeting were having that cognitive dissonance? because they know they're feeling uncomfortable because somebody may have had a negative experience with a mental health issue in law enforcement. So don't want them on there. And so they're coming from that emotional place rather than cognitive is in the brain, rather than thinking it through, saying, okay, I'm hearing what other people are saying. They're in that place of fear, in that place of their emotional experience, that they cannot get to that place where they recognize.
So are you meaning like them, like recognizing that fear is what's coming up, and because that fear is coming up, I can't recognize other things because I'm too uncomfortable with the fear or the those, I call them dysregulating or unfun feelings?
Yeah, dysregulating emotions, unfun feelings, fear. I mean, I think fear is probably the biggest emotion that we experience. It's kind of the root of a lot of things. And so, yeah, I think that's what it's coming from. When I was having that conversation with Michelle, I was coming from a place, I was just like, oh no, you're not, because I was coming from a place of fear. And that's when I had to step back and I had to say, no, we need to, talk about it and discuss it and do that. And it was uncomfortable to get to that place. And Michelle's somebody, that I love very much and I'm very safe with, but it's still uncomfortable.
I love that you're pointing that out, that this is someone that I love and it's still uncomfortable. It's so imagine what happens inside of us when it's someone we don't know and we're feeling that.
Right. So you're in this big meeting, or you might be in a meeting that people, maybe a church group or some other kind of social group, and you're feeling these feelings, or you're sensing that somebody else is feeling that. And how do you come together and do that? And again, you can only control yourself. Am I having cognitive dissonance? You might recognize that somebody else is, but like you said, sitting in and relaxing and saying, okay, this is a group thing. We have to listen to the group. And it's not about me and what I want and what I think is best. It's about what can we come to as a group. And by staying curious, just kind of open that door to that curiosity and say, well, let's see how it goes, and we'll reevaluate. In your example, the people can feel safe. Let's not have law enforcement now. You might do it for 6 months, a year, and you might realize, wait a minute, we do need to have a law enforcement presence on this because of these other issues surrounding that. And if we bring them in, we can get that point of view and incorporate that. I don't know if that's the answer, but that's the whole thing, is even if you're not at a place where you can make a decision because you're having that cognitive dissonance, as a group, if you as an individual can do that, you have influence in the group.
Yeah.
Okay. Let's stay curious. Let's see what happens.
Well,
and we can revisit it.
Right. And then there's things that I hadn't even thought of. I want to give a shout out to Jan too, because he said hello. So hi, Jan. Thanks for being here.
Jan.
Is that when, like, after the meeting, there were things I hadn't even thought of. They could ask law enforcement to come make a presentation to their committee or commission or whatever I can't remember what it was going to be called. They could also, at the public meetings, law enforcement could show up and give input, so that, we're people that work on law enforcement. So even if they don't have them on the committee, they're still not cut out of the process, which was not even something I had thought of when I was in the meeting, that, oh, wait, there's still an avenue for them to voice their opinion. And I thought that was really important.
And there's the thing, and that's why a lot of these complex issues almost have to stay open-ended. You can make a decision. You can say, okay, we're going to move forward in this direction, but that is not necessarily the end of it. there has to be an evaluation period. Does it work right? We have to look and see, be it in your, your life at home, be it in your intimate groups, be it in a governmental kind of group that you're participating in. The whole point is to stay open to the process, to stay open to the understanding that you gain. Because we come in with a certain understanding, but like you said, I mean, I've done that too, where I leave a meeting or whatever, and I'm like, oh my God, I didn't even think of this.
Yeah.
And then it's because the thought process, you're in a meeting for an hour or so, and you might not have had the chance to think that all through.
Yeah. And also, I think when those emotions become flooded, right? And I think we all get flooded, especially in difficult conversations.
Oh yeah.
And in board meetings, you can't walk away from the public. It's not respect. And you can't even say, I need a few minutes. I mean, I don't know. I haven't tried it. Maybe you can say, can we have just a few minutes, or can we slow this down just a little bit? That might have been helpful too, because it just, it got to the point where, I mean, there was a tremendous amount of cussing and anger and one after another, and people unmuting. It was tough, which, and I don't think I was the only one who got a little bit flooded with what was happening, but allowing room for that messiness of the process, that I think, while at least for me, I'm talking about this board meeting, but the same thing happens inside of me. And I've got to allow room for that messiness, and that, so that I can find that peace, so that then I can work it out, but that's so hard.
Right. And, I'm thinking of this in terms of the holidays coming up. I was watching the news this morning, and they said two of the things that cause arguments at the holidays. The first one is alcohol, and the second one is politics. So, it's interesting. So, here, the difference is, in all the examples that we talked about, we're coming together to try and have a certain outcome. I'm going to go into the holidays saying my outcome is to go and enjoy and spend time with my family, who, now, we have not all been together for 2 years. It was 2 years ago Christmas. I'm looking forward to seeing my family. And just enjoying the holidays. And so, I think I'm going to go in and say, I'm going to steer away from politics. Luckily, we're not drinkers, so that's not going to be an issue for us. But to stay away from politics, and just to say, what are we going to, how are we going to enjoy each other's company, and just be together and love each other? Because at the end of the day, isn't that what it's about?
Yeah. And I'm thinking back to Thanksgiving. I had decided for that day I was just going to be surprised and curious and happy with whatever showed up. Like, even in my mind, that the old tapes would play, as some people say. What are people going to say later? What, the old iTunes started? I have no idea. The young kids. But, and I'd be like, wait, no, I decided I'm going to be pleasantly surprised with whatever happens to show up. And there were some very interesting things that showed up for me, and it still was a beautiful day regardless. So I think maybe that can be our little tip. We don't usually leave tips today, but I was curious has gone consistently throughout this conversation. So shall we leave a tip? Stay curious.
Stay curious. That's the tip for today.
Okay, guys, it's been 30 minutes. There's also a Relatively Damaged podcast where I interview guests, amazing guests, not just guests, amazing guests who have overcome some sort of struggle in their lives and how they found hope and healing. You can find that podcast on Spotify, Apple, and pretty much anywhere you listen to podcasts. I'm Angela.
And I'm Kat.
And we'll see you next week.
Wrong way.